Sorry about the little. Now, okay. Uh, the reason why we started a little late here is because I was told by YouTube as I was trying to go live that that the stream quality was very poor, and so I canceled it to start a new one, and then that meant I just discovered that that meant canceling the whole plan for this particular stream. So the people who are waiting for me to go live are still wondering where I am, unless they've moved over to the YouTube channel. But hopefully, yes, it looks like people are figuring that out. At least the three people who are waiting. Okay, so. But of course, this will be there afterwards, archived too. Just gonna get right into it because one of the things I've read about doing live streams that get archived is that people who are especially watching later get really tired of the first minute involving the guy saying here's why we started late, etc. So just to get going here, hello Kamala. People are very welcome to say anything. Questions, comments are very welcome. And let me just get right into it. This is a broadcast that I've been calling a rent party. Originally, it was, I figured I'd take a break from my regular Monday missives related to my musical history learning application. It's not an app, but it's an application anyway. It's yeah, davidrovics.com/history. I've been doing different broadcasts related to different modules. There's 15 modules in the musical history teaching aid, and I did the first 6 more or less, and I was going to do the 7th today, but then realized with the help of my wife that we didn't have any money, and so I did a crowdfunding campaign to cover next month's rent and food and stuff like that, and it was very successful. And then I thought, well, you know, people out there may be wondering, well, why is this guy doing that, and what is this all about, and how is that a way to make a living? And maybe people aren't wondering. I wonder, though. So I figured there must be somebody else wondering. And in fact, I know there are other people wondering because, hi Paula, because I wrote a booklet about it, which has sold pretty well, I am told. This is the booklet. It's called Sing for Your Supper, a DIY guide to playing music, writing songs, and booking your own gigs. I wrote this 12 years ago. It's published on PM Press, and I was looking at it. I was looking over the thing like a year ago, and realized that it was at least a third of it is really not particularly relevant anymore. Maybe more than a third, because so much of it related to things like CDs and selling CDs and marketing CDs and all kinds of stuff related to CDs. And while it is still relevant in terms of many things related to CDs are relevant today in terms of like making recordings, that's still relevant. But making money by selling CDs is not a relevant thing anymore. But it used to be a lot about. It used to be a whole lot about you know, how we musicians survived, indie musicians, or mainstream ones too. So there's been a lot of changes, you know, in terms of the model of how to survive as a musician, even after you know, just in the past like 10 years. I mean, you know, so much has changed. Certainly in the past several decades, it's been, you know, massive changes of all sorts, good and bad. So I've been riding these changes out for my career as a musician, And good morning, Randall. And so it happens at such with such rapidity. Everything is changing, and you're constantly trying to keep up and trying to figure out how you can make it work now, and under the new circumstances. And if you're busy just trying to keep up and trying to figure out how it's working while you're also trying to continue to work on your craft and write music and stuff like that, it can be so much to keep up with that you don't take time to stop and look at what's happening around you, and maybe reflect on it a little, and maybe even write something about it, or drop a few breadcrumbs, or and do something that is hopefully going to be useful for somebody else out there who is trying to do this sort of thing. Because I noticed that as I have been playing music for professionally for now most of my adult life, I see that so many other people that I know, some of them become continue to make a living as DIY kind of performers like me, and others become even much more successful and get good record deals and all that, and play for thousands of people, and that happens, and I know some folks who that happened to, and but then so many more just give up and stop making music professionally. And the reason why they stop is, I think, usually because things are changing all the time, and it's hard to keep up with these changes. And in some cases, people just don't want to try to deal with the changes. There's a lot of different reasons why you wouldn't want to try to keep up. But I thought that for anybody interested in the whole DIY music phenomenon, like the technical aspects of it, how it works in terms of how to do music and do it for a living as a independent musician, I thought I don't think I've ever actually done a broadcast on this subject, like a live stream broadcast on the subject. I'm pretty sure I haven't. I'm pretty sure I also have not the best short-term memory, so if I have, I've forgotten. But I don't think I have. I've written about it, and I've in essays and in booklets, and it's a kind of a specialized subject. I think that's part of why I haven't bothered doing broadcasts, because like when you do a workshop, I find very few people want to come to like things like songwriting workshops. They're much more interested in coming to a gig, a concert. But a songwriting workshop is more specialized. Oh yeah, when we did the video, me and Alona, like a year ago or something. Yeah, that was we went all over the place in terms of subject material, but we did definitely focus on that, didn't we? Thank you, Paula. So again, questions, comments are welcome. One thing, here's a special deal for anybody watching this broadcast. If you're watching this broadcast and you are an independent musician interested in the latest of my thoughts on the subject of how to make a living as an indie musician, as well as other tips on songwriting and performing and different things, you can just email me, david@davidrovics.com, and put in the subject line book request, and you will receive an attachment, a PDF attachment of the first draft of the updated version of the pamphlet, of this pamphlet, basically. And I will send it to you. It's completely rewritten, actually, but it is basically the update of this pamphlet, and it's called How to Be a Troubadour in the Age of Crowdsourcing, which is essentially what it's about. Yeah, so just email me and I'll send you a draft, as long as you promise not to post it anywhere in public, because it's not published yet. And so we will get back to the regular history missives next week, and maybe sometime I'll also think about doing a much more expanded version of this particular broadcast, which I figure will be an overview of the aspects of doing what I do, being a DIY musician, and how it works, or how it can work, or how it works for me. But I figured this will be an overview kind of broadcast on the subject, and I figured I'd start with the question of a rent party. What is a rent party? Because this is what I originally billed the broadcast as, a rent party. And so what is a rent party? Actually this whole concept goes way back. The Almanac Singers, which was the band, the main band that Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie and various other brilliant musicians, songwriters, other folks were in. The Almanac Singers, some of the same people that went on to be the Weavers later, but Pete Seeger being by far the most well-known member of the band, as the 20th century played out later. But the Almanac Singers in New York City in the late 1940s, and maybe even starting before, back in the late 30s, they would have rent parties, rent hootenannies, where they'd be raising money for their rent. And this is a long-standing tradition. Of course, this is a band that was more well known for singing at picket lines and that sort of thing than for doing more conventional kinds of concerts, which may be why they were more needing to do rent parties, because the picket lines often don't tend to pay, but the landlord still wants the rent. And so the Almanac Singers back then were following the model that also existed back then in the form of Pacifica Radio, which was formed, I believe, in 1948 or sometime around there, just by some draft dodgers, World War II era draft dodgers who started Pacifica Radio. And the way they did it, their funding model for Pacifica Radio was to put out all the content on the air for free, and then to ask their listeners for donations if they like what they're hearing, and to tell the listeners, this is how it works: you donate and we can keep on producing this material; you don't donate and we're going to go off the air. And so there's going to be like most listeners maybe will just listen and hope that the other listeners are able to fund the station, keep it going, because they enjoy listening, but for whatever reason they're not going to donate, either because they're too broke, or they have other priorities, or they just can't get around to putting a check in an envelope, or whatever it is. There's a lot of different reasons, but it's going to be most listeners that don't donate. I'm sure it's the vast majority that don't donate, but if you get a core number that do donate, then you have a basis for continuing what you're doing, whether you're Pacifica Radio, the Almanac Singers, or NPR, or me, and or any number of things, Oxfam, or whatever, the United Nations. I mean, they're working on similar funding models, but whatever it is that you need the funding to do what you're doing, and this is one way that can work. And you are going to be, whether you're a NGO providing services or a musician putting out music, or you're going to be, there's going to be a lot more people who are maybe using your services or listening to your music than are going to be people who are supporting what you're doing financially or in some other way, and that's how it is. But you need to be able to network with the people that are going to be in some way supporting what you're doing, and that is so much of what's involved with being a DIY musician in terms of the business aspect of it. Of course, there's other aspects, like the being a musician in the first place, and what's involved with that, and I just thought I could go through a bunch of these points. I have actually taken down notes with bullet points um, which kind of describe this my basic understanding of what's involved with doing what I do. And again, if anybody out there listening would like a copy of the draft of my new what will eventually be the new addition to this pamphlet that I put out on PM Press 12 years ago, Sing for Your Supper, you just email me at david@davidrovics.com, and I will happily send you an attachment. And this originally was being billed as a rent party because I was needing to raise money for rent. The money has already been raised, but being that I am talking about how to crowdfund your DIY music life, it would be remiss of me not to mention that you can support what I do by going to davidrovics.com and clicking on the donate button, or joining my community supported art scheme, my CSA, by clicking CSA at davidrovics.com, which also you can also click on subscribe. You'll get to the same place, davidrovics.com/subscribe. And I've noticed a couple of comments, and again, if anybody have comments or questions, I would really appreciate it, because I want to talk about things that people are actually interested in. But okay, how to make the comments stay there. When I lived in the projects, they called it nights of fun. It would have music, dancing, good food, maybe some... Why did the comments stay so short? Some gambling. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, rent parties happen in all sorts of contexts. And I need a better system for looking at the... Okay. Technical difficulties, please stand by. I'm just going to get to... oh, Jesus. Never mind. I'll just see the messages as they come, and I'll try to read them quicker. But questions and comments are most welcome. So please send them anytime. And I will just... Okay, now I'm going to find my YouTube channel and watch live now. Good. Okay. Yeah, okay, now I will more easily be able to see questions and comments as they pop up, because they will stay on my computer screen, not as they don't stay on my phone, which is what I'm broadcasting from. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these bullet points on being on different aspects of being an artist. And these are all points that could be expanded on greatly. Probably I could just do a separate show for each of these points, and maybe I will if there's interest in it, and which can be demonstrated by people emailing me and telling me, or commenting on this broadcast and saying this was great and useful, and we want to hear more in much more detail. So if I get enough messages like that, then I will happily do more of this sort of thing. But the bullet points that I have here, which is largely basically what you will find if you get your free copy of my Troubadour, How to Be a Troubadour in the Age of Crowdsourcing booklet. The bullet points, it's already been great. I like those comments. Thank you, Patrick. The first one I got is, it sounds very new age, nurturing the artist within. And what I'm talking about here is, if you are an artist, if you are a songwriter, for example, or a musician, let's just assume you're a songwriter like me. I'll just pretend everybody's like me. So you're a songwriter. You want to... you think you're good, or you want to be good, or you have potential, and you want to be performing in some capacity, playing gigs. You think that you have something to do that an audience will enjoy, or you have some reason to believe audiences maybe already have enjoyed what you're doing, and you want to do more of that. And um, then that's great, and you need to take yourself seriously as an artist, uh, which doesn't mean, you know, elevate your importance above other people in society. It means just that you look at art, your craft, your work. It's all the same thing, you know, that you are an artist. That's what you do. Um, you know, just like a plumber fixes sinks, you write songs. That's what you do. And if you are taking your art as seriously as a plumber takes plumbing, then you're going to be doing a lot of art a lot of the time. You're going to be spending a lot of your time writing songs, listening to music, playing music, imitating what other musicians do, all sorts of things related to music. Of course, if you're touring, you know, you're going to be doing a lot of driving, you're going to be booking gigs. I mean, you're going to be doing a hell of a lot of things that are related to music, whether or not they're actually musical, you know, in themselves. Obviously, driving maybe not particularly musical activity, but you know what I mean. You're going to be doing a lot of stuff related to your music, and that is something you need to prioritize, because like any craft, being a musician takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. Um, you know, so first of all, I mean, I don't know who's going to take you seriously as an artist if you don't take yourself seriously as an artist. I mean, there's maybe going to be, yeah, there are going to be people who, regardless of whether you take yourself seriously, if you're good, there's going to be people who take you seriously anyway. And, you know, but you need to take yourself seriously in order to really progress as fast as you can as an artist. And certainly in order to possibly even think about making a living as an artist, you need to take yourself seriously. You know, maybe you can create great art without taking yourself seriously as an artist, but you're never going to make a living at it unless you think that you, for some, you know, you got to believe that you just somehow or other, at least on some level, deserve to, or that you think it's possible to make a living as an artist. Maybe lots of people deserve to who don't. That's for sure, but you need to take yourself seriously, and your art seriously, and really spend time at it, and really work at it, which leads me to the next bullet point, which is about playing music. You need to, if you know, if you're a musician and you're writing songs, regardless of whether the songs are overtly political, it really doesn't matter, and whether they're political, and it really doesn't matter whether you write one song a year or 100 songs a year. You know, I mean, maybe those things matter in different ways, sure, but in terms of the music and how good the music is, it doesn't matter. Everything needs to be good. There's no room for bad music. It all needs to be good. So it doesn't matter if you're political or not, or if you write a lot or if you write a little. You know, the music is so vitally important. There's a general assumption among people who like this kind of music that I do, and among a lot of people who actually do this kind of music, this kind of, like, you know, overtly political music, particularly of whatever genre, there is a tendency to think that because of the content of what I'm talking about, then how I'm saying it in terms of the music, the style, or other aspects is less important, and that's ridiculous. The music is an essential part of casting the spell. You need, they're songs, they're not poems. If you're writing a song, it's about the music and the words and other things too, and that all needs to be, you know, you need to take the music seriously. So that means not only if you're writing songs, it means, you know, you need to take, you know, write something interesting on a musical level, but something fresh and new, and you know, which is very challenging. In many ways, it's you know, it's going to also sound familiar, and that's great, and it should, because you're using chord progressions that you didn't invent, and words you didn't invent, and rhymes you didn't invent, and, you know, it's, of course, it's all also very familiar, and that's fine. But there also needs to be something about every song that has a fresh quality to it. And part of that is also involving you have to a big part of the playing music within this bullet point here is about imitation. You need to be familiar with lots of other stuff that other people do. You will never be able to be a good musician unless you already know how to play lots of songs that other people wrote, and to play them really well, as if they're yours. And you need to imitate the way other musicians play, and really be able to play the way they played things. You need to imitate. Imitation is absolutely vital. You will never write anything good by thinking that you're just original, and that you're going to just be brilliant and original, and without steeping yourself in other musical traditions. That's a fantasy. Good writing and good performing always comes from being steeped in traditions, and people will think your stuff is so original, and they'll say you're so original and unique, and you'll know that they're that it's not true, that sure, they're hopefully you're convincingly original sounding, but that is based on you being steeped in musical traditions. Inevitably, I've never ever seen or an exception to that. Maybe there is one out there. I mean, some people kind of a lot of people, one of the confusing things about this whole profession is that there are a lot of people and a lot of corporations that create all kinds of mythology around musicians, and particular musicians, and how they're so brilliant and how they got to be the way they are, and this is all just like pulling the wool over your eyes. I mean, they're selling you this line of this person is a genius and all this, and they're doing that in order to elevate that person from the rest of society and make it seem like they deserve to be a pop star. And this is all based on the economic model of record companies. They only want a certain number of pop stars. It has nothing to do with how much talent there is out there. It's all about their whole, their algorithms for success, and how they want to, how they're going to do it in terms of, how many pop stars they need in different genres that are saying different things, that are different colors, that are different genders. They got their whole formula, and they're going to get you to fit into it or not. And for most people, they don't fit into the formula. So, so it's not going to work that way, for most people. But you gotta figure out a different way to do it. And the model, the mainstream corporate model, was broken already. I mean, it's been broken for a very long time. So I mean, it's certainly been broken since I've been around, for sure. I mean, the model of you get a record deal, and you the record company has management and booking agents, and they're going to book your tour, starting with opening for some famous band, so that you can get well known, and then you'll tour on your own and get all this tour support and advertising and budgets for recording, and all this kind of stuff. That model is great, but it doesn't apply to most of us, and increasingly it applies to fewer and fewer people. But basically, continuing on with these bullet points. In terms of performing, you need to take that seriously too. If you're taking your music seriously, and that means that like if you're an acoustic musician and you think that sound systems are boring, or that everything that's electric is boring, or beneath you to understand, or you just out of some kind of weird principle, you can't ever really learn how to use a microphone, or you can't ever really learn how to use a sound system, because if you could, then you wouldn't be a real folk musician, or whatever kind of nonsense you might be convincing yourself about, in some kind of prima donna weird stuff. I mean, this is so common among a lot of musicians, and you just gotta can all that stuff. Just be a regular, humble human being, and realize that what's involved with your job, and understand these things. And one of the things that's involved with your job is, if you're a performer, is knowing how to use a microphone, knowing how to use an electric, how to plug in an instrument, and what to do once you plugged it in, that it doesn't behave the same way as it does if it's an acoustic, if you're just playing acoustic, you need to know about things like the effectiveness of standing as opposed to sitting. You need to think about visuals. People want to be able to see the performer. If you're in a place where there's no stage, then you certainly need to stand when you perform. And if there is a stage, you still might want to stand for various reasons. But good to think about these things, and good. And I'm a terrible example in terms of memorizing your material, but it's good to memorize your material and look at your audiences in their eyes and faces and interact with them and tell stories. In terms of writing songs, I've talked about the importance of steeping yourself in the tradition and imitation. But I think one of the best tricks to writing is to think about it in terms of telling a story. You want to tell a story, and I'm going to see Paula's comment here. It's the same as... Yeah, she's amplifying what I just said. And tell a story. Tell a story. Try not to tell 2 or 3 stories, but just tell one story, and see how you can do with telling one story and making sure that every line belongs there. That every line is serving a purpose. Every line is perfect. That every line says exactly what you want to say. And never settle for a line that doesn't say what you want to say, and never settle for a rhyme that is imperfect, because anything like that will break the spell and ruin the song. Never rhyme wife with knife. Never say, never have the end of a line in a song be you and me. Never use the phrase all night long. There are various tricks to songwriting, and some of these tricks you learn from listening to music. You can't do the most absolutely cliched things, that have been done too much over the past few decades. You have to avoid those things. You're part of a culture. You're not just creating art that stands on its own. It interacts with the rest of society, and so you have to be aware of what's happening. In some sense, maybe if you grew up in a cave and you never heard "This Land Is Your Land," then you think that it's okay to write songs with you and me in them, but it's not okay. You can't do that anymore. Let's see. We have any thoughts here? A long time ago, that was called Moon June Spoon. Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah. So, under the old model, making a recording was something you could you would do every year, and you would make a new CD every year. And the reason you would do that, regardless of whether you had a record deal, was because if you were producing everything yourself, putting out CDs on your own, you would do that because you're selling CDs at shows and also selling CDs through your website online. What used to be, for any artist that was making a living as an artist back in the 80s or 90s, or even as recently as 15 years ago or so, any artist, any DIY artist, as well as lots of bigger artists on major indie labels or on major labels or whatever, for any of us, the degree differed, but the percentage was similar in terms of how much CD sales was central to your survival. So then, of course, you would record CDs every year because those are the ones you'd sell, are the new ones. When you'd go around touring, a lot of the same people might come hear you at your shows if you're playing once a year in a different city or twice a year or something. and they're going to be, if they're your fans, they like your music, they would buy your new CD every year. And so that's you'd sell a lot of CDs when you tour. I used to sell 3,000 or so on an average year, and that ends up being you sell the CDs for $10 or $15 each. That ends up being a significant income. So that recording the CDs was something I would usually do just from my own pocket, because I knew I was going to make that money back real quick as soon as I had a tour. And so, but still today, making good recordings is essential. You still are going, even if you don't, you're not able to actually make money from selling CDs, and even if you can't rely on selling CDs as a means of making the money that you need for recording, you still need to make good recordings. Why you need to make good recordings, hopefully it's fairly obvious, because, but in case it's not, people listen to good music and they don't listen to bad music. So you need to have good, well-recorded music. I mean, that's what, when people are looking around for music on Spotify and wherever they're doing it, which is largely on Spotify, they're gonna find lots of really well-recorded music, and they're not going to be wanting to listen to stuff that doesn't match with the rest of the stuff they're listening to in terms of recording quality and instrumentation and all that stuff. I mean, you got to be putting out good music if you're going to have an audience that's going to want to listen to it. So that's still essential. And in my bullet point here about making good recording, some of the things that involves, as if you're used to being a regular sort of solo performer type, touring and performing as a solo musician, then you may have developed a certain skill set involving touring and performing. But you need to recognize that you may not have the skill set that is involved with making really great recordings, because that's a whole different art. And so there is real excellent reason to use, do research, find people that are really familiar with the type of music that you do and the type of sound you want to get on an album, and work with producers, engineers, and studio musicians, or musicians who have a lot of experience in studio work, to make recordings, and you will be able to make much better recordings with much less time and money than if you do it some other way. Even if you're trying to save money by doing it some other way, you will end up probably not saving money, and you will end up creating a piece of junk. And that's so that if you save money and create a piece of junk, that's not very useful. So I could definitely do a whole segment on each of these bullet points, but I will just continue with the overview, and which is probably just maybe an overwhelming stream of information, but I'm learning something from this broadcast anyway, and hopefully somebody else is. Next bullet point I have is about sharing the music, which is once you have recorded music to share, as well as just songs that you've written, or other songs that you perform that you have a good version of, you can do a good rendition of it. Sharing your music is obviously, well, maybe this is all obvious, or maybe none of it's obvious, but sharing music is an essential way to to develop an audience and to have any chance of touring and making a living as a musician. Obviously, you have to have. I'm trying not to use the word obviously because it sounds ridiculous, but anyway, you need an audience, and in order to get the audience, you need to have music that's out there that people are listening to, that they like, and they can hear that music through various means. and that those can involve doing performances like what I'm doing right now, talking on my YouTube channel, live streams on social media like Facebook can get a lot of attention. Various means of doing that, through the various platforms, using various different platforms for different types of live streams is a good idea. People can hear your music live at gigs when you're touring and performing. You can get your music out there once you've got something decent recorded. You can get your music out there very easily by using platforms like cdbaby.net, and there are others. I've never used any others because CD Baby is very well done. Never needed to bother looking around elsewhere, but what they do is provide a very easy to use platform where you can upload anything that you've recorded, like an album, and then get it out there in with basically not more than a few clicks. Get once it's uploaded, you can sign up to get it out there through any streaming service that you want, including all of the above or all of the ones that pay, or choose ones that you don't want to use. It's very flexible. But I recommend basically putting your stuff up on all streaming services that pay. I also put my music up on Bandcamp for unlimited free downloads, but there's no reason to put it up on other free platforms that you don't have direct control over, unless it's a platform that is paying. Of course, the revenue from these platforms is minuscule, so it is not it in no way makes up for the loss of income from CD sales. So this brings me to the next bullet point, which is getting used to asking. Because the old model, the old model before Reagan privatized or deregulated the airwaves in 1980, before 1980 or 1981, there was a law in the United States, as there is in the similar laws in other countries still today, but in the United States there was a law that one person or one corporation could own one radio station and not more. So this meant that by law there was a lot of diversity on the radio in terms of different owners in different cities. I mean, maybe not diversity in terms of who those owners were, but less diversity there in terms of probably race, gender, and class. But in terms of regional diversity, there's just a lot more independent local control over media. And this meant that artists could become well known in a particular region without even necessarily having a major record deal. But that kind of stuff is a thing of the past in terms of commercial media, since Clear Channel took the opportunity in the post-Reagan years and then Clinton years, when Clinton deregulated the media even more. They took advantage of the situation, and now the media in the United States, radio and TV, is largely controlled by a tiny number of corporations, and there is no diversity on the airwaves at all, and you'll hear the same pop songs throughout the entire country, and it all comes out of the same places. So, and the number of songs they rotate through on these pop stations continues to decrease. So you'll hear them cycling through the same few dozen songs. If you just listen to a station for an hour, you'll hear the same songs repeated. So it's so that model of getting your music out there it died a long time ago. But so the thing is that once you're you get your music out there, and you get used to asking, because the model of survival for musicians, it's always involved other people supporting musicians in some form. you always are relying on your audience to survive and keep on doing what you're doing, because obviously you need to eat and pay the rent too. So if you're touring and performing, whether you're talking about the Middle Ages or now, it's the same thing. People need to eat, and so for musicians, whether you're being supported by the royalty to paint portraits of famous people and sing in the king's court, or whether you are playing for the peasants in the bars and sleeping upstairs after the gigs in medieval England, or if you are currently alive today, traveling around playing in music venues or union halls or wherever it is that you're playing, your needs as a human being are the same. And so you, in the current model, where you are needing to come up with money to make recordings, and then you're putting it up on the web, and you're not going to get any money from it, even if you get tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of streams per month on Spotify. Certainly, if you get tens of thousands, you don't get much money at all. I can tell you that. You get 27,000 streams a month, and you'll get a little more than $100 for that. So unless you're getting hundreds of thousands of streams every month, then you're really talking about the kind of income that doesn't even come close to paying for a week's worth of your typical rent in a place in a city like here, Portland. So what you do is you get used to asking for help from your fans to do things, like to do everything, because this is the new model, which is not a new model, but you're now, the old model of selling CDs is no longer available. You don't have that option anymore. So what you have left is the Pacifica NPR model, Almanac Singers Rent Party model of crowdsourcing your career, your albums, as well, and that involves being willing and able to ask people, believe that you are providing a service that people would have some reason to want to support, and to ask for it, and give them ways to support what you're doing. That's the and so that can involve various aspects, there of getting people to help you in doing what you're doing as a musician. There are different aspects of that. One of them is crowdfunding recordings. Another is creating a sort of a CSA, which you can read about at davidrovics.com/subscribe. You can see how I run my CSA. There's other people who do it, including me, through Bandcamp. Their Bandcamp subscribe button. You can read about how they set it up, and Patreon is another popular platform for this sort of thing. But it is very much like the old sort of medieval model of crowd being funded, funding artists and musicians by the sort of vassalage of the court. Except in this case, you are doing it throughout. Your crowdfunding instead, which gives you a lot more flexibility because you don't have to worry about what the king thinks. Somebody knocked on the door. I'll be right back. Thank you. Package. Okay, so, and I'm just going to take a moment to look at these comments, see if there's anything I need to reply to. Yeah, yeah. Somebody posted about how they started a pirate radio station in their physics class and played me, Pete Seeger, and Phil Oakes. I think that's a very excellent project. And yeah, and we don't want to be left with only commercial ones. And in order to not be left with commercial ones, we need to fund the ones that aren't commercial. And somebody commented it's the same in Finland. And yes, I think there are since given the comment from Finland, I will just say that that there are important differences between how things are done here in the United States and how they are done in many other countries, including Finland. And like, for example, I get played on Finnish national radio at least once a year. I know that because I get $10 every time they play one of my songs in my royalty checks. So it's often a significant percentage of the royalty check, because if I get played 1,000 times by community radio stations in the United States, that pays 1 or 2 cents per play, and so it doesn't add up to much in the royalty check. Whereas Finnish national radio pays $10, and if you get played on national radio in Britain, you get $94 or whatever. So it's getting to be played on some station like that is very significant, and this kind of thing for artists like me, as you understand, you just commented something that indicates understanding, is that Finnish national radio is playing artists like me, and national radio shows in the United States do not play artists like me. Even in Britain, they sometimes play artists like me, although the one guy who used to play me in Britain on a regular basis got fired years ago, and I have barely ever been played on BBC since Andy Kershaw lost his job. And I almost never get played on national radio anywhere else, other than very occasionally in Canada. But the differences, especially for people who are Finnish or who are Canadian in Finland or in Canada or in other countries, the difference in those countries oftentimes is that there are laws requiring a certain amount of content played on local and national and regional radio stations, that a certain percentage of the content be content created by artists from those countries. And that those laws have a tremendously positive impact on artists from those countries, and I can tell you that for sure. And because for one thing, there are artists in many countries that are often often fantastic, and often probably just as often are not all that good. But they get promoted, and definitely in Australia as well, and they get promoted by the media of that particular country, and they get more famous than they would possibly get if they were relying on the market, because oftentimes they're not all that great, but they get promoted anyway, and so there's pros and cons, but I think it's a very good thing generally to promote local artists, and it's something that barely happens in the United States. Who is the DJ who played my songs? I do not know, actually. I have no idea. I only know that I just get these royalty checks every 3 months, and occasionally it says that it's from Finland, and if it's from Finland, it's always $10, and I'm pretty sure that's because that's what Finland pays when they play an artist on national radio. I assume that's the case, because I actually don't know. It could be just some local Helsinki station or something, but if it were, I would imagine it would pay less than $10 for but I really don't know. You don't get much to go on when you get these royalty checks. Let's see. Hi from Italy. Are you too late? Well, it depends on what you mean by too late. I've been broadcasting for an hour, and I'm going to be stopping soon. So you're not too late to hear the rebroadcast, which will be on when I stop this broadcast. Let's see. there are a couple of small radio stations here, but they don't get much listeners. Yeah, that's also a thing with the internet, especially that the small stations. I think small radio stations have fewer listeners than they used to, and they used to have a lot. They have very few listeners if they weren't very well run. Although there are small stations that have a lot of listeners because they're so well run. Come on, will I sing anything before I finish? I was thinking that I would. I will just, yes, so I will just talk a little bit more on these bullet points, and then I will happily take requests. Why don't they play you on the radio? Yeah, I have a song, Why Don't They Play You on the Radio, and I don't remember how it goes. But, but although it would be the appropriate song to sing for this occasion. Just a little bit more in terms of the crowdsourcing concept. It used to be that if you put out an album and you had support of a label and you were getting played on radio and that kind of thing, that if you had a gig, potentially the venue or your promoter would take out an ad, and you would see the ad for the artist in the weekly paper, and everybody would know who this artist was because they heard them on the radio. And then because of the ad and because of the radio and everything else, they'd have an audience. Of course, for indie music, it doesn't work that way. You need much more active, much more targeted publicity to have a situation where you actually have an audience coming to hear an indie artist. And so you need to crowdsource your gigs. And this is something that I find is probably the number one reason why a lot of people start out trying to be independent artists and tour and all this, and they give up on it because they don't have people coming to their shows. And even if they do have people listening to them on the internet, and maybe even if they have a certain audience that comes to hear them at certain festivals, or they have some kind of a regional following somewhere, they never manage to successfully break out of that and tour on a wider basis, even though they have fans in various places. And I think the reason that usually happens is because they're trying this sort of traditional model of networking directly with venues, and they are believing the stuff that they hear from the people that try to sell them these publications that have lists of venues and lists of booking agents and all this kind of stuff. But the actual thing is that these lists are very rarely of any use, because in order to get audiences, most of the time what you really need is people promoting your shows who like your music and know who your audience is locally and where to find them and how to get the word out effectively in that crowd. And you need to help them figure out how to do that, and there's certain tried and true methods, and you can share with them how that works, and you can see on my website how I do that. If you look at davidrovics.com, you'll see, click on how to organize a show, you'll see that I talk about that. Fan clubs can be useful in terms of people sharing on social media or anywhere else, sharing information about your upcoming gigs and tours and stuff like that. What they also call street teams. But basically, you need to assemble your own street teams. You need to talk to people in different places. You need to network with people on email lists and on social media and in various forums to figure out who out there would be willing to organize a show, and then communicate with them about how that works, and you can then manage to get crowds and get paid. Because you need to get paid, and you can't get paid without a crowd usually, and so that's the way around that is really networking with your fans to figure out what are the core group of people in your fan base who, for one reason or another, think that it's worth spending a little of their time, valuable time, out of a given year to organize a gig for you at some point. It's a lot of work, and it's not something I ever want to ask people to do unless they really want to do it, because it's a lot of work, and I don't want to impose on people. I only want people to do it if it's something they want to do, and I'm sure it's true of other musicians too. But if people are willing to do that sort of thing, you need to be able to network with them and give them the opportunity to do that, because otherwise you're not going to have audiences. You're not going to be able to do it. You can't network directly with venues. So the tour, you crowdsource the tour, you crowdsource the gigs in terms of people coming, spreading the word. You crowdsource the album projects. You crowdsource your life. You know, that's how it works. That's why I did a rent party. That's why, because that's how this works now. It's about crowdsourcing. It's not a new concept. It's just a new word. Yeah, that's the overview, and that took an hour and 6 minutes, which is kind of what I thought it would take for the overview, and I could do an hour on each of those bullet points, and maybe I will sometime. And if you guys think that's an interesting idea, then email me, tell me. I need lots of encouragement if I'm going to spend that much time doing this, because if it's not of interest to any particular indie musicians out there, then that's fine. I don't need to do it. But if you want a copy of the first draft of the Troubadour, How to Be a Troubadour in the Age of Crowdsourcing, just send me an email at david@davidrovics.com, and I will happily send you a copy. And if you want to donate for that, then that would be much appreciated. And there's a donate button at davidrovics.com, and you can join my CSA there, which is even more appreciated. Yeah. And I will now do a song if somebody wants to hear a song. And I saw that there are some requests for, but let's see. Oh, let's see. There were also comments. Let me see. Question: do you have gigs at grassroots union meetings? I play at a lot of union halls. So I don't necessarily play at meetings, but I do concerts in union halls frequently in Europe, and every once in a rare while in the United States. Let's see. And for those who just came in late, this will be archived. And good, Patrick. I'm looking forward to sending you the book. And we've gotten a few song requests. And yes, I will do the ones that I remember easily, like a fine Italian listener who wanted to hear "No One Is Illegal." But if you tuned in just to hear about DIY music and stuff like that, that's over now, and now we're just continuing the broadcast and taking song requests. And maybe I'll sing you a song that nobody's ever heard before. If you like that idea. But here's "No One Is Illegal." Clouds gather in your forests, drift to my desert town. I think of far-off places as the rain is coming down. You're bent down in the fields, picking fruit there from the vine, and it ends up on my table as it moves on down the line. The moon shines brightly in the night sky. The river flows from south to north. With the changing of the seasons, the birds migrate back and forth. They say that you can't come here, not in the light of day. Somebody has got plans for you. Starve at home or hide away. Will we open up the borders? Tear down the prison walls, declare that no one is illegal. Watch the giant as it falls. So much travels across these borders. So much is bought and sold. One way goes the gunships, the other comes the gold. Free trade is like a needle, drawing blood straight from your heart. The border's like a prison, keeping friends apart. Will we open up the borders? Tear down the prison walls, declare that no one is illegal. Watch the giant as it falls. Stockholders cheering, the world's getting smaller. Hear the drowning child crying, why are the fences growing taller? Some whisper in the shadows, while others count the dollars. Some have suits and ties, others chains and collars. Will we open up the borders? Tear down the prison walls, declare that no one is illegal. Watch the giant as it falls. May the fortress walls come down. May we meet our sisters and our brothers. Stand arm in arm there in the daylight, no longer fighting one another. Will we stand together? For therein lies our might. Will we understand these words? Workers of the world, unite. Will we open up the borders? Tear down the prison walls, declare that no one is illegal. No one is illegal. No one is illegal. Thank you for that request. That was fun. You sang it while on the road to a massive anti-fascist and anti-racist march last Saturday. Nice. Nice. Well, I know there have been other requests, and I appreciate them, but I'm going to do... Oh, thank you, Papa. I love getting praise from my dad, even at the age of 50. He's a great musician, by the way. I could find him on SoundCloud. That was a great... Oh, thank you, Billy. Yesterday, February 11th, (1918). The year was 1918, the place 69 yacht by. The unemployed and hungry gathered to ask why. The bankers and stockbrokers lived like kings and queens, while the ragged children starved behind the scenes. Tens of thousands rallied for action to be taken, for the state to show the poor had not been totally forsaken. When no response was coming, plans began to be arranged for the taking over of the stock exchange. The syndicalists at Volketshuset were all well aware that undercover cops were everywhere. Plans were kept secret so there wouldn't be a snag. When the time came, follow the one wrapped in the red flag. Thousands followed them, not knowing what lay in store. Soon found themselves upon the exchange's floor, where such ostentatious wealth cried out to be estranged from the profiteers inside the stock exchange. The stockbrokers were not harmed, but the cops were kept at bay, as the floor was occupied for much of the day. The Battle of the Borso would be a story to retell. The protest and the prison time would be remembered well. They didn't overthrow the bankers, but the actions of the date led directly to reforms of the Danish welfare state. Working class prosperity no longer seemed so strange from the day the workers took the stock exchange. The year was 1918, the place 69 yacht by. I just wrote that yesterday. You were thinking it just a few days ago of, any wobbly song is a good choice. Okay. And yeah, I just wrote that one. Thank you, Kamala. Any wobbly song is a good one. Okay. I'm being very random about which of these requests I'm doing, and it's just random. It's just what I feel like. But I'll read this amazing song. It really chimes in since it's 100 years from the Finnish Civil War between the proletariat and the ruling class. It's and then there were a few song requests following that from other people, which the Finnish Civil War is something I want to write about, and I really want to go to Finland, and I've never been to Finland, and I'm really curious about Finland. And one of the viewers of this episode, Paula, is quite an expert on radical Finnish history and the Finnish working class radicals who were largely the ones who came to the United States after the Finnish Civil War. It was you associate Finns with red stars here in the U.S. if you have been paying attention, because there's wherever there are Finns there are radicals, and this is not because Finland necessarily has more radicals than other societies, I guess, but they all left after the Civil War and came here, it seems. I mean, I know now there's lots of good Finnish radicals today, but after the Finnish Civil War, a little less than 100 years ago, yeah, lots of people left and came to the U.S. and Canada and became the backbone of many, many different labor organizations in both the U.S. and Canada, and I'm sure other countries as well. Let's see. Well, somebody said any wobbly song. So here's one by Joe Hill. Let's see. Fellow workers. Let's see, how's it go though? Fellow workers, pay attention. What I'm going to mention, for it is the fixed intention of the workers of the world, and I hope you'll all be ready, true-hearted, brave, and steady, to gather round our standard when the red flag is unfurled, where the Fraser River flows. Each fellow worker knows they have bullied and oppressed us, but still our union grows, and we're going to find a ways, boys, shorter hours and better pay, boys, and we're going to win the day, boys, where the Fraser River flows. For these gunny sack contractors, they've all been dirty actors, and they're not our benefactors, each fellow worker knows. So we've got to stick together in fine or dirty weather, and we will show no white feather where the Fraser River flows, where the Fraser River flows. Each fellow worker knows they have bullied and oppressed us, but still our union grows, and we're going to find a way, boys, shorter hours and better pay, boys, and we're going to win the day, boys, where the Fraser River flows. Now the boss, the law is stretching, goals and pimps he's fetching, and they are a fine collection, as only Jesus knows, of why their mothers reared them, and why the devil spared them, are questions we can't answer, where the Fraser River flows, where the Fraser River flows. Each fellow worker knows they have bullied and oppressed us, but still our union grows, and we're going to find a way, boys, shorter hours and better pay, boys, and we're going to win the day, boys, where the Fraser River flows. I'll just look at these comments, but I think I will wrap up this broadcast, and yeah, 26th of April in Helsinki. Good. Anybody who can manage to get to Helsinki for the 26th of April? Where am I on the 26th of April? I'll be somewhere. Denmark. Yeah, so I have enjoyed this, and I hope you have as well, and I will be signing off now. And If you have enjoyed that broadcast, feel free to share it anywhere you see fit. It will be archived momentarily, and then it'll be in shareable form. Actually, it's shareable even anytime. And you're very welcome to join my CSA or press the donate button on my website, davidrovics.com. And if you happen to be in Texas or California, I will be there next month. And I do have room for 1 or 2 other gigs if anybody might be interested in organizing something somewhere. Especially Austin. Nothing in Austin yet. Only Dallas, Houston, and Waco. So it seems like somebody should organize something in Austin, but nobody has yet. And that's how it goes. And then in April, in the middle of April, I will be going to Europe. And if you live in Europe, I would love to hear from you about doing a show. I have plenty of room for other shows, 22 booked so far between Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. And I have room for more gigs in all of those countries as well as in other nearby countries potentially. And thank you so much for tuning in. Oh yeah, definitely I could visit Southern Europe actually. It's basically just a matter of if there is a gig somewhere in Southern Europe or Northern Europe, basically the bottom line, and same in the United States, the bottom line is there needs to be, especially if it's far away from where I'm going to be touring otherwise, like somewhere in Southern Europe, which is far from anywhere I'm going to be otherwise, then what I need is sponsorship from some kind of union or left political party or cultural ministry or arts council or whatever, some kind of sponsorship, because I need to make sure that I'm going to be at least able to get there and leave without losing money. So basically, even if I end up spending most of the money I make on a plane ticket, at least I know that I will not lose money. So what I need is a gig that has a guarantee of 500 euros. If there's a gig like that in Italy, I would love to go to Italy and do a gig in the spring, but that would need to be the situation. And if that might be possible in Italy or anywhere else in Europe, then I look forward to hearing from anybody who might be up for organizing such a show. And thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you soon. And I think next week I will return to doing my history broadcasts, unless there's so much enthusiasm about doing more DIY music broadcasts that I changed the theme for a while. I don't know, but with on the Monday missives. But we'll see, depending on response. But I'll be back on Monday doing something, and look forward to communicating with you. Figure is Fondo. I need to know your actual name. I always forget, but I see your handle, and I will be in touch about the Italy gig. Looking forward to that possibility, and looking forward to seeing all you people out there on the road and in the streets somewhere in the world sometime soon, I hope. And ciao.